After watching this video, you will be able to install Linux Mint even if you have never installed Linux. I am going to walk you through all the necessary steps. You will see how to check if your hardware is compatible with Linux, which system to install, 64 or 32-bit, how to make a bootable USB drive with the Linux OS on it. I will also show you some BIOS settings that may be necessary for Linux installation, how to backup your data before the installation. Of course, you will see the installation process with all the necessary explanations. And in the end, you will learn some post-installation settings that will help to make your system secure and little faster than it is by default. The last step will be to restore the backup data on your newly installed Linux Mint system. If you are an absolute beginner and you have never installed Linux, this video is for you. Let's get started. Hello everyone, it's Arch Linux user. At the beginning, I would like to point out a few helpful things. This video is quite long, so I provide the timecodes in the description. If you're interested in only a specific part of this video, use the timecode to jump to that part quickly. Also use the arrow keys on your keyboard. You can scroll forward if you want to skip some parts, or you can scroll back if something was unclear. You may also enable the closed captions or subtitles, if my pronunciation is not easy for you. Hardware compatibility with Linux. Unfortunately, not all hardware is compatible with Linux. And this is not a fault of Linux. It is because some manufacturers do not want to open source their drivers, or do not want to make proprietary drivers for Linux. But don't worry, Linux works fine on the most hardware. Nevertheless, before you attempt to install Linux, I recommend you to do some research. First, you can check the Ubuntu certified hardware list. If your computer is on the list, you're lucky, and you should have no problems with Linux on your computer. This database is also useful if you want to buy new hardware, and you want to make sure that it is compatible with Linux. Second, you can check the Arch Linux laptop page. Although this information is not for Linux Mint, if it says that Arch Linux works fine on your laptop, then Linux Mint will work fine too. For example, let's have a look at Apple laptops. As you can see, almost everything works. However, some models have problems with the webcam. So if you install Linux Mint on MacBook Air 2013, you will have to sacrifice webcam use. Finally, it is always good to Google the model of your computer together with the word Linux and see if there are any major problems. For example, let's Google Asus X51R Linux. And as you can see, the first bug is graphical user interface fail while on battery. Such kind of messages should make you cautious, and it is better to do more research before you decide to install Linux on this laptop. I had experience of installing Linux Mint on this laptop, and I wasn't able to eliminate this bug. Whether 64 or 32-bit. Before you even download the Linux installation image, you need to know if your processor supports the 64-bit systems. There are many ways to do it. If your hardware is not very old, it is very unlikely that it doesn't support 64-bit. Nevertheless, it is still good to check it for sure. If you're on Windows 7, go to Start menu, right-click on your computer and select Properties. Here you can see the system type. If it says 64-bit, you're fine, and you can go and download Linux Mint 64-bit ISO. However, it may say that your Windows is 32-bit, but it doesn't mean that your processor doesn't support 64-bit. The 64-bit processors can work fine with 32-bit systems. In this case, you need to go to the Device Manager and find the model of your processor. In my case, it is Intel i3 3330 with the frequency 3.5. I Google it and go to the official Intel website. Then I need to find what architecture it supports. Here in the Advanced Technology section, I can see that my processor is in fact 64-bit, so I can download the 64-bit Linux Mint image. Unfortunately, I do not have other Windows versions, and I cannot show you this procedure on Windows 10 or Windows 8. I assume the same steps should work there too. If you're on Mac, you need to go to About This Mac, and it will show you the model of your processor. Then you simply Google it. I can give you a tip. If your Mac has a Core Duo processor, it is 32-bit architecture. Otherwise, you have a 64-bit processor. Make a bootable USB. When you know the architecture of your processor, you need to download the Linux Mint installer. So you go to Linux Mint website, then go to Download and select the leftmost menu. It is the latest stable version of Linux Mint. Currently it is 18.1. Linux Mint has several desktop environments: Cinnamon, Mate, XFCE and KDE. It is up to you which desktop environment to choose. The difference between these environments deserves a separate video. If you do not know which desktop environment to choose, I recommend downloading Cinnamon, because it is default in Linux Mint. If your hardware is old, you will benefit from installing XFCE. I will download Cinnamon 64-bit. There are two download options. You can use torrent. If you do not know how to use torrent, then download using a direct link. You need to find your country and click on any link that is available. If there are several links for your country, just use one that you think is the closest to your location. This will download the ISO file, which is an image of the Linux Mint installer. Next, we need to write this image to a USB drive. Of course, you can also burn this image to a DVD drive, but I do not recommend doing so. The performance will be very reduced. I assume that most of the people watching this video use Windows. To make a bootable USB from within Windows, I recommend using Universal USB Installer. It works the best in my opinion. Go to its website and download it. I provide the link in the description. Then double-click on the file of Universal USB Installer. If you get warning like this, don't worry. Give it permission to run, it is safe. Agree with terms of the license. Select Linux Mint as your distribution. Browse for downloaded Linux Mint ISO file and select it. Never select option Show All Drives. I repeat, do not select Show All Drives. If you select this option, all your hard drives become available for writing. You can accidentally write the Linux Mint image into your main hard drive and destroy your Windows system and all your data. That is why it says use with caution. Also disconnect all external USB hard drives that you accidentally do not write into them. Select your USB flash drive and make sure that it is your flash drive. If you go to your computer, the flash drive will be listed in removable storage. In my case it is the disk F. So I make sure that I select the disk F in the step 3. Then select Format the drive. Be aware that this step will remove all the data from your flash drive. So if you have any important data on your USB drive, you still can cancel the process and copy this data somewhere. If you are sure that you have selected all the right options and copied the important data from the USB drive, you can click Create. This will write the Linux Mint image to the USB drive. It takes from 5 to 20 minutes. During this time, I recommend you to go back to the Linux Mint download page and check the release notes. You can find here some useful information. For example, how to fix freezes that happen with some graphic cards. You can also check the known issues and how to fix them. We will come back to some of these points during the installation process. In case you do not use Windows, for example you already use Linux or you have only Mac, you can create a bootable USB drive from within these two systems too. Again, there are many ways to do it on Linux and Mac. For new users, I recommend using UNetBoot-in. It is available in most Linux distributions. Just search for it in your software manager and install it. If you do not find it in your distribution, you can download it from the website. You go to Linux and install it as described here. You can add PPA for Ubuntu and Ubuntu-based systems. Alternatively, you can download the binary file. For macOS, you can download the DMG file and run it as many other Mac programs. The interface of this program is the same for all platforms. The process here is similar to Universal USB Installer that I showed before. You select the option Disk Image, search for the downloaded Linux Mint image. In the type, select USB. The same precautions apply here. Be careful that you do not select any hard drive. Also, it is better to disconnect all external USB hard drives, so you do not accidentally write into them. Be sure you select the USB flash drive in the drive option, and click OK. Wait until the process is finished, and make sure there were no errors. When a bootable USB created, we need to test it. Keep your USB flash drive in the USB port and reboot the computer. During the first second of the boot process, you should see the message which tells you to press a certain key to launch the boot menu. You can see it is F11 on my system. For you it can be any other key, usually Escape, Del or F12. Press that key, and when you see the boot menu like this, select your flash drive. I select Samsung flash drive in my case. If everything is fine, you should boot into the Linux Mint live session. This is how it looks. In case it doesn't work, there are two possible reasons. First, you created a bootable USB drive incorrectly. Go back and make sure that you download a full Linux Mint ISO file, and that you write the ISO to the USB drive without errors. Second, you may have some restriction settings in your BIOS. Let's have a look at the BIOS settings. BIOS settings. There are two things that may cause problems for your Linux installation. The first one is the secure booting, the second one is the UEFI mode. I recommend disabling both. You need to go to your BIOS settings. To do that, reboot the machine, and during the first seconds of the booting, you should see a screen like this. And it should say which key to press in order to enter the BIOS settings. It is Del key in my case. So I press Del and enter the settings. And in the settings you need to find boot options, and there find secure boot and UEFI. I do not have the secure boot option on my computer, but I have UEFI, and I can choose between UEFI and UEFI plus legacy. I enable the option UEFI plus legacy. If you cannot disable UEFI mode, do not worry. Linux can install with the UEFI mode too, but I think it is a very new technology and it doesn't work well yet. If you have secure boot, you need to disable it. The menu will look like this. After these actions, you should have no problems booting into Linux Mint Live session. Backup your data. This is a very important step. I would say it is the most important step, because if you do it wrong or you skip it, you will lose all your data. I would also like to state here that I am not responsible for any of your data loss if my tutorial won't work for you. I just show you the way to do it, but it is you who has to do the work and take all the responsibility, so do not blame me if you lose your data. There are various ways to do backups. It is getting more and more popular to use cloud backup. So if you use any of the online backup services, then backup all your data before the installation process. And check with the provider of your cloud service if it will be possible to download the data to Linux systems. Unfortunately, I am not very familiar with cloud backup services and cannot show you any example. I usually backup all my data using external USB drives. I think it is the cheapest and quite reliable way to backup the data. You can buy a 2 TB drive for less than $100. I will show you how to backup your data using an external USB drive. First, you can backup all your data from within Windows. I think the easiest way to backup the data from Windows will be by copying all your files to an external USB drive. If you have only one disk on your Windows, it is probably disk C. You need to go to this disk, then go to the folder Users, and copy the folder with your username. In my case it is called VBox, and paste it into the USB drive. It is possible that you created folders outside of this user folder, so make sure you copy those folders too. If you have more than one disk, often people also have the disk D, copy all the data from those disks too. This is not the ideal way to backup the data, but I think it is the easiest to understand for the majority of the users. If you are an experienced Windows user, you can use some specific programs to do the backups, but make sure that your data is not compressed into any proprietary format. It is better to backup without any compression. The second option is to backup your data using Linux. When you are in the Linux Mint Live session, open the File Manager and find your Windows hard drive. Click on it, this will mount it to the system. Next, go to the main menu and search for Backup tool. Click on Backup Files, and in the source, select the folder you want to backup. To backup Windows files, you need to select Other, go to your Windows hard drive, then Users, and select the folder with your username, VBox in my case. If you have several users, you can backup the whole users folder. If you are unsure if all your data is in the user folder, you can backup the whole system. Just select the whole hard drive. But this will backup a lot of unnecessary files. In the destination, select the USB hard drive, where you want to backup your data. Be careful that you do not select the flash drive with your Linux Mint system. I select LLU here, which mimics my external hard drive. Again, be very careful, do not rush and check everything several times. Then click Forward. If needed, you can add files or directories that you want to exclude. I won't add anything. Click Forward, check everything again, and if everything is fine, press Apply. In the end, you should get a message like this: the backup is successful. Again, if you have several partitions, for example disk C and disk D, backup each of them. Installation. Installing Linux Mint is very easy. Boot from the USB drive. I have shown how to boot from a USB in the section Make a bootable USB. Go back to this section and watch it again if you missed it. Then double click on Install Linux Mint. The first option is to select the language. I keep it English, but you are free to change it if you are more comfortable with another language. Continue. Here you are suggested to install some third-party software. This is just some licensing issue, and Linux Mint team cannot include this software by default. Don't worry too much about it, select to install it. You will most likely need this software. For example, it includes MP3 codecs, which you need to listen to music. This is the most important part. You need to decide where you want to install your Linux Mint and how to partition your hard drive. The first option is to install Linux Mint alongside your Windows. You can choose this option if you really need to dual boot Linux and Windows. I am against this option because it often causes issues, but I understand that some people cannot give up on Windows. You can proceed with it, but keep in mind it is not the best option in terms of performance and reliability. The second option is to erase the disk and install Linux Mint. This is what I recommend for the new users. The installer will do everything for you, and this setup is quite good. It will create one large partition with your system and a swap partition. The swap partition is required for the case when your system exceeds the amount of available RAM memory. All extra things will be written to this partition. If you install Linux Mint in the UEFI mode, the installer will recognize it and it will create the UEFI partition too. I will skip the next two options, they are for advanced users. The last option is also for advanced users, but I still would like to show it. If you install Linux Mint with the plan to learn more about Linux, and you think that you will install other Linux distribution in the future, you will benefit from manual partitioning. So select something else and click Continue. Here we have many Windows partitions. I have backed up all my data from this system and it is safe to delete it. Click New Partition Table. This is a warning that all the data will be removed. I am aware of this, so I click Continue. Now we have only free space. Select it and click on the plus sign. The first partition will be for our system. Its size depends on your requirements. If you are going to install just a basic system with regular programs like a web browser, Office and media, 15 gigs should be enough. If you can afford, go with 20. If you want to install many additional programs and especially games, then you need at least 30 gigs. The more the better. It is my test install, so I will assign it 15 gigs, which is 15,000 megabytes. Keep it as primary, beginning of the space. For the file system, keep it ext4, it is a reliable file system. And for the mounting point, select root, which is marked with a slash sign. Basically it means to install the system here. Click OK. Now select the rest of the free space and create another partition. This will be our home partition, where all the data will be stored. It should be the largest possible partition. Take the size of your free space and extract the size of your RAM memory. If you don't know how much RAM memory you have, go to the menu and search for System Monitor. Then go to Resources, and here you will see the size of your RAM under the memory section. It is 2 gigs for me. 17 gigs of free space minus 2 gigs of RAM gives 15 gigs. So I allocate 15 gigs for my home. It will be much larger for you because I have already mentioned it is my test installation. The logical partition type allows you to make more than 4 partitions. We do not need that, so we make it primary. For the file system, keep it ext4 and select home for the mounting point. OK. The rest of the space will be assigned to swap. I have already mentioned that swap is used by the system when there is not enough RAM memory. Make it primary and in the file system select swap area. So we have created the root, home and swap partitions. If you were not able to disable UEFI in your BIOS, you better do not do manual partition. Choose the option to partition and install Linux Mint automatically. However, if you still want to do it manually, here's how it should look. You simply need to create an additional partition and mark it with the type EFI. Finally, check that your bootloader will be installed on the same disk as your system. We have SDA partition table here. And the bootloader should be installed on SDA too. Install now. We are given the final review of the changes we are going to apply. Check if everything is as you wanted and press continue. The installation process has started. While the system is installing, we can do a few more settings. We need to set the time zone. Select the area where you live. I select Stockholm, which is in Sweden, but you can switch it to New York, for example. Press continue. You can change your keyboard layout if it's not a standard keyboard. I keep it English US. The final step is to create a new user. Type your name. It's average Linux user for me. Then name your computer. You can give it any name you want. It is a virtual machine, so I name it VirtualBox. Then decide on your username. It is better to make it short. I will make it ALU. Create a password. Try to make it complex enough that you get at least good password on the right to it. Then you can select automatic login. This is a good option for home computer and lazy people. The system will load without the login screen. If you're installing this Linux Mint on a laptop, I recommend enabling the encryption. In case you lose your laptop, nobody will be able to access your private data. But be careful, if you forget the password, you won't be able to access this data either. Select it only if you are paranoid or if you will have sensitive data on your computer. For the demonstration purposes, I select to encrypt my home. That's it, now you need to wait some time and the system will be installed. If you do the installation in the UEFI, you may get this error. It says that group bootloader installation failed. Do not worry, this problem was mentioned in the release notes. Remember, we checked this page earlier. To fix it, disconnect the internet, reboot and start the installation from the beginning, but this time without the internet connection. I tested it and the system installed fine after these measures. When the installation is complete, restart your system. You should get the message like this. So remove your USB drive with the Linux Mint installer and press enter. In a very unlikely event, your system may get stuck during the shutdown, and you won't get the message to remove your installation media. It happened to me a couple of times, do not worry. Just remove the USB drive and shut down your system by pressing the button on your computer. Then start the system again. I hope you will boot into your newly installed Linux Mint system. After this installation, the system is ready for use, but I would like to show you a few more things. After installation settings. Linux Mint already provides you a welcome screen with all the necessary information. You can check it on your own. I'm going to show you how to set up the update manager, how to install drivers, how to enable the firewall, how to retrieve the encryption passphrase, and how to adjust the settings of your swap partition. How to set up the update manager. You can open the update manager by clicking on this icon in the system tray, and it already welcomes you with some suggestion. I think Linux Mint is too cautious, and they a little exaggerate the danger of these updates. Of course you can select do not break my computer, but I recommend you to use always update everything. This will keep all the packages on your system updated, and thus secure. I use this option all the time and I had no single problem. If you are very afraid of breaking the system, choose optimal stability and security. Here we presented with some updates, but before we update the system, we are suggested to switch local mirrors. Let's do it, it will make the download speed faster. Enter your password, select the main mirror and wait for a few seconds until the servers are ranked. Then select the fastest mirror, which is on the top. Apply. Do the same for the base mirror. After these steps, reload your cache. And close the settings. Now let's install the updates. If you are curious what is going on, you can click here and see all the processes. We have more updates, and you probably have noticed that they are marked with different levels. These numbers range from 1 to 5, and mean how risky the update is. Firefox web browser is under the number 2, so it is safe to upgrade. But if you scroll down, you will see some updates with the rank 5. These are the key parts of your system. It is the kernel and related packages. You would not see the kernel updates if you selected do not break my computer, and they would not be selected if you choose optimal stability and security in the settings. Kernel updates can break your system, but they also bring critical security updates, so there is always a trade-off. Okay, let's install these updates. Yes, we agree to install additional packages. If during the update process you get a message like this, which asks you if you want to keep old configuration file or replace it with a new one, always select Replace, unless you really know what you are doing. The updates are complete. Keep your eye on this tray icon. If it is green, everything is fine. But if it gets blue, it means you have some updates. Open the Update Manager and install the updates. How to install drivers? To install drivers, you need to go to the main menu and search for Driver Manager. Open it. It takes some time to update the cache. Then it should present you any available drivers. I have some VirtualBox drivers installed already. They were installed automatically during the system installation. But I still have one driver available. It is firmware for the Intel processor. This firmware allows your Linux Mint system to update the firmware of the processor. It should improve the performance of the processor. Let's install it. If you have a dedicated graphic card, any drivers should be shown here. Among the available options, I recommend you to use the proprietary drivers. They usually work better, but free drivers can work fine too. When the drivers are installed, you need to reboot the system. Next step is to set up a firewall. Your Linux Mint is secure enough, but you can harden it even further if you enable the firewall. Go to the main menu and search for Firewall. Open the firewall application. The settings are very simple, you just need to enable it. It is very user-friendly. You can change the profiles between public, home and office. They have a little different layers of protection. I usually use the home profile. Keep in mind, this firewall may block the internet access for some of your applications. If it is the case, you can enable these applications in the rules sections. You can click Add and select the application with the pre-configured rules. For example, we can select BitTorrent and click Add. If you are a little more advanced, you can enable specific ports in the Simple tab. There is also an Advanced tab, but I think people who use Advanced tabs won't watch this video. Here you can see new rules for the BitTorrent. If you want to disable them, select the rules and press the minus button. You can also read more about the firewall and the settings if you click on the Home button. How to retrieve the encryption passphrase. If you chose to encrypt the home directory during the install, it is wise to retrieve the encryption passphrase. This passphrase is used to decrypt the data. Now the decryption happens when you log in and enter your user password. But your user password and the encryption passphrase are not the same. If your system breaks, you will need to use the passphrase to decrypt the data. Well, there is a way to decrypt the data with your login password, but it is tricky, and it is better to have a passphrase. To get the passphrase, open the terminal and type encryptfs unwrap passphrase. Enter your password. You will get the sequence of characters and numbers like this. Copy or write it down and keep it in a safe place where only you can access it. Obviously, do not store it on the same computer. If something happens to the system and you cannot log in, you still will be able to access your data with this passphrase if you, for example, load the Linux Live session from a bootable USB. The last step is to adjust the use of swap. It is the most optional among all, but it may make your system a little faster. Open the terminal and type cat/pros/syst/vm/swappiness. You will see the value of 60. This means that when the system uses more than 60% of your RAM memory, it will start writing the files to the swap partition of your hard drive. RAM is a temporary memory. It is short form of random access memory. The problem here is that the RAM is always faster than the hard drive, so when the system starts writing to the hard drive, the system becomes slower. So in this case the system uses the swap partition for that. Remember, I explained the swap partition during the installation part. We can force the system to use more RAM and write to the disk only when more than 90% of your RAM is in use. To do that, type sudo nano/atc/systctl.conf. So scroll down the file and in the end add vm.swappiness equal 10. You can also add the description for yourself that it decreases swap use. Then press the combination of keys Ctrl-O to save the file and Ctrl-X to exit from the editor. Reboot the system and check if changes have been applied. Open the terminal and type the same command we used before. Now it should show 10 instead of 60. Now let's go to the last step of this tutorial. Restore the backup data. To restore the backup data, you simply need to do the reverse steps of what you did during the backup step. You can either copy all your files from the external hard drive to your home directory. This is the best time to sort all your data if it was not sorted before. You already have some categorical folders here like documents, music, pictures, videos. So copy all your files accordingly. If you need, you can of course create new folder. For example, you can create a folder Linux and put there all Linux related files. If you're lazy or if your files are sorted already, you can move them from your external hard drive to your home with Linux Backup tool. You select Restore Files, choose the option Directory, because we made backup without compression. In the source, you select your external hard drive with the backup data. And for the destination, select your home directory. It should be named with your username. I also suggest creating a new folder and restore everything there. Let's call it data. Later you can move the files where you want. Click forward, check if everything is alright, and press apply. In the end, your data should be in the data folder on your newly installed Linux Mint system. Now you should have functional and reliable Linux Mint system, and many users do not need more. However, it is Linux, and there are many things you can improve and customize. In my next video, I will show the things you can do in Linux Mint to make it even faster. I will also explain how you can adjust the system specifically for you, and a lot of other useful stuff. So make sure to subscribe and give a like to this video. Thank you for watching.